Now we're here this morning. You might think, I guess, in a sense, that you're here because of a book this morning, which some of you will already have purchased. We're not actually here because of a book. We're here because of a man, a quite remarkable man. And I'm going to quote a few lines from the foreword to the book. It says, "The army music scene has inevitably changed during the period covered in these pages, so that we have a personalised historical record of public events and a view behind the scenes. The author is a gifted, dedicated and determined man. His humour accompanies a strong sense of fairness and moral principle. He is a man who has fought his corner on more than one occasion." I'd like to hear about that. So says Ray Stebbin-Allen, who wrote the foreword to this book. Sometimes, too, the accolades which accrue to a musically creative officer tend to overlook his or her primary calling as a minister of the gospel. While music has been a major factor with the Bearcrofts, early in their service I visited, that's Ray Stebbin-Allen, visited their centre at Gosport to conduct a meeting and found them deep into a period of revival. This book is not only about Norman, but also a first-hand account of his army world, its personalities and occasions. It makes a humorously laced, informative and inspiring read. I've had the privilege of reading it already. You probably have not. I really do thoroughly recommend it. But before you have a chance to go and purchase your copy, I'm sure you'll want to greet Norman in a good old-fashioned army way.
Excuse me for sitting down, but I'm told I'm allowed to now. I'm going to make every privilege I can. Well, it's lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming. I didn't know whether there'd be one or two people. I knew my wife would be here and our friends from the SPNS and so forth. And this lady over here, who was the editor of this book. You couldn't have had a better editor. Everything I sent she agreed with, so what else could you say? And I'm delighted that she's here this morning. Thank you very much for coming. I'll talk a bit about what happened and some of the things that in this book, and then if you want to ask a few questions, I might be able to answer you as we go along. I was born into an army family. My parents were Salvation Army officers. I was the fourth child of the marriage, the youngest. I have two sisters. They were the oldest of my two sisters, who are still alive. We went to see them this week. My eldest sister is 96, and the other one's about 94. My brother was killed in the war, and then I was the last of the family. My sister says that she was a disappointment, being a second daughter, and I was a mistake. You have the picture exactly of what the family was like. I was born at Wallsend-on-Tyne. My parents were stationed there in 1926. I was at the Royal Albert Hall on one occasion, and a man came to the door and said, "Hello, Norman." I said, "Hello," as I always would. He said, "You do remember me, don't you?" You know, it's terrible when people do that because you see hundreds and thousands of people and you... now tell me, Gordon said, "Look at me and think. Look, think." I looked and thought. I kept struggling. Gordon said, think. He said, "Wallsend." I said, "Oh yes, Wallsend-on-Tyne, 1926. Yes, I remember you." I was born in 1926. He went away as happy as could be that I remembered who he was. I quickly joined the junior band. I learned to play a cornet. I do remember that the tune it was about Christmas time, and I learnt the second cornet part of a tune called Sorley, which was in the old carol book. And I would go round, but every time we got to a lamppost, we didn't always play Sorley, and so I didn't get a lot of lip fatigue on that particular occasion. But that's the way it was. We moved around corps to corps. I was never at any school longer than 12 months. Now people say to that can't happen, but in those days officers moved every year, didn't hang about a year and you were gone. And so I went to goodness knows how many schools, and that's the way it was. One of the corps we went to was a place called Southall. Became a very important corps in my memory. Eric Ball was the corps bandmaster, and Sam Hooper, who used to work for SB&S, he was your tailor. He was the songster leader. And I do remember going to the corps there, and we had an occasion once, I think this is in the book, a national day when the scouts and the guards and the sunbeams and chums, you know what sunbeams and chums are, people don't know what they are today, but they were what we used to have in the army. And I can remember the sunbeams doing a drill. Actually, they cleared the hall of all the chairs, and all the parents stood round, and the kids all did their stuff, marching up and down. And I remember the sunbeam leader shouting out, "Left turn," and they all turned left except one girl, and she turned right. I thought, there's a girl there with a mind of her own. Some 20 years later, I married her. Not because of the sunbeams, but she did have a mind of her own. And those of you who knew Jill knew that was true. I was in the junior band, as I said, went to Southall, and then of course the war came. Well, the war came back in 1939. My parents then were stationed at Barrow-in-Furness. And I can remember my dad going into the door having to paint black all over the windows so that the Germans flying over wouldn't see where the Salvation Army Hall was. And then we only were just there 12 months, then came to Ilford. When we got to Ilford, all the bombing had started. And every night it was bombing, every night. We had a shelter in the garden that we used to go into. And we had an old lady live next door who used to come and share it with us because she was on her own. And one day my dad said, "I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to sleep indoors." So he used to go indoors and we'd all go down the shelter. The house wasn't bombed, but all the houses around were. So that was that. Then it came time when I thought I should be doing my bit to stop Hitler. So I wasn't called up, but I went and volunteered. And I went to a recruiting officer at Acton Town. And the recruiting sergeant said to me, she said, "I think you need to go in the Guards." He said, "It does mean if you do, you have to sign on for 7 years." But he said, "That's fine, because the war's going to last 7 years. So. And I believed him, of course. So I signed on for the Lifeguards. What an experience that was. I got to Combermere Barracks, and everyone was shouting. There's sergeants everywhere yelling and shouting. I thought, why do these people keep shouting? Anyway, we did the drills and everything, and I wondered what on earth I'd done. In the distance one day, I heard a band rehearsing. I thought, I'll see what this band was. So I made inquiry. It said, "Oh, it's the Lifeguards band. They rehearse here every day." So I had the tenacity to go ask for an audition. So I went along with my cornet for an audition. I had it in the case. And the sergeant major, they were called corporal majors in the lifeguard, he shouted, "What's it doing in the case?" Well, so I was keeping the, "Get out the case!" Yeah, let me, so I got out the case. Then he said, "What are you going to play?" Now just bear in mind where I am. I said, "I'm going to play a piece called At the Cross Where I First Saw the Light." At the what? At the what? I said, and tried to explain it with the Salvation Army Cornet Solo, written by an Eric Lightson. So anyway, I played it and they accepted me into the lifeguards band. And that was quite an experience, of course. The lifeguards, as you probably know, is the regiment who supposed to look after the life of the king. In those days it was King George VI. And I became a state trumpeter from there. So that wherever the king went, we had to go with him and play a fanfare when he turned up and all those kind of things. I'm not sure if it's in the book, but there was one occasion when Queen Mary, the Queen Mother, King George's mother, she came to, or was it his wife, I can't remember now. Anyway, she came to open a garden of remembrance in Piccadilly. And 2 state trumpeters were required to be there. And we had to stand one each side of the door she came in and blow as this poor lady came through. What it must have been like for her, I can't imagine. And we were in state dress. You've probably seen pictures of state dress with trumpeters, and we were there with that. When I got there, I discovered I hadn't got my white gloves. And there was a very pretty girl standing over with a pair of white lace gloves on. And I said, "Could I borrow them?" "Yes," she said, "you can." So I put these little white lace gloves on and pulled the sleeve down as far as I could like this, so it just held the trumpet. Because the cameras were everywhere, of course, for newscasts and all that. And well, they were that. Well, a lot of things happened there, and you'll find quite a number of them in the book. My experiences, because the horses then came back as the war was coming to a conclusion. The horses came back, and the trumpeters were the first one to do horse riding. I shall never forget the first time I went in, I was given a saddle to put on the horse. And it was a massive horse, a great big thing he was. And I put the saddle over him, and the straps went under his tummy. Well, they were about that far too short. And I was trying to pull these things. The sergeant came out, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, this isn't big enough for him." "Yes, it is. Do it properly." I said, "Well, I can't do it." He said, "This is how you do it." Then he came up to the horse, went back, boom, in his stomach. The horse took a deep breath, and he did it up. He said, "Use your head." I was about to say, "You use your knee," but I thought, "Oh, better of it." Well, those are my days in the lifeguards. Pardon? We had there was a notice in the guard room. Feeding of horses is strictly forbidden. Do not give the horse anything at all. When I was a kid, I'd been to the pictures and I saw Tom Mix and all those people riding. You know, they had friendly horses. So I thought I'd be palling with the horse. You couldn't get sweets in the wartime, so I couldn't get chocolate for him. But I went to a chemist and they were selling licorice. I can't get sweets, but I can get him some licorice. So I gave it, and he was fine. Then we had to take them out of there for inspection on the yard. We're standing out waiting, and the colonel's coming on to inspect us all. And I'm hot, so I looked up, and licorice was all standing, long dribbles of it. So I quickly got my handkerchief out, blowing those, hanging them up just in time for as the Colonel came past. Well, I have hundreds of stories about when I was in the lifeguards and all the things that happened there. I did meet Mr. Churchill. Well, we were on the steps of St Paul's Cathedral when, for the celebrations of VE Day and St Paul's Cathedral, and 4 trumpeters were on the steps. And we had to play a fanfare for all the crowned heads of Europe as they came, and also one for Mr. Churchill. And he came up the steps and looked at me and said, "Well, trumpeter, the gold's kept well." That's the first time he'd seen it since the war. Then he went off into the cathedral. I think there's the other story in there about the trumpet major. It may be in the book, but there was the second time, when the war finished in Japan, they had another meeting at St Paul's and thought they should do it on a bigger scale than done before and have 6 trumpeters. For 6 trumpeters, they thought they needed a conductor. As you come down St Paul's steps, there's a statue there to Queen Anne and a little gate. So they thought they didn't want people to see the conductor, so he had to go in this gate and conduct us from behind the statue. When we got there on the Sunday morning for the thing, the gate was locked. Now the railings around the statue are high. You've got to reach up to them, and they've got points on the top. Couldn't get him in, so we had to lift him over. So we managed to get him over this shut, because he's all in this dress, riding breeches and all this special uniform. We got him over, and there he... When it was over, of course, we couldn't get him out. So as we went, cheerio! We avoided him the next day, I'll tell you, we were in headquarters. In those days, I was in the corps band at Southall, and our officer, who was the major that was there, he always wanted me to go to training college. Kept on to me about becoming an officer. And I'd got a career mapped out. I wanted to be a professional musician, and I got a lot of contacts from the people I've been in the Guards with, because in those days, a lot of the people in the Guards were people in the big symphony orchestras who were called up, but went straight into the lifeguards band. And I wanted to follow that career. But he worked on me hard, and I had by then I'd met Jill, the girl I was telling you about with the sunbeams, and we'd been going together a bit. She didn't want me to take her out. She didn't like me. And she used to come and sit in the meetings just on Sunday nights. And I was on the solo corner section facing this way, and she would always sit over there. So to see her, you had to keep going like this. The band sergeant said to me, "Face the front. You're not supposed to be looking over there." So, it's ever so hard to look over there without turning your head around. Anyway, her mother, who I think took a shine to me, gave me her telephone number at work. She worked for London Transport. So I rang her. She said, "You can't ring me here, I'll get the sack." I said, "Well, I won't ring again if you come to the pictures with me tonight." "I can't come." I said, "Well, I shall keep ringing till you do." "Oh, no, you won't." I said, "Yes." So eventually she came. And we went to the pictures, which you shouldn't have done in those days. You weren't allowed to go to the pictures, but I went quietly. We didn't even hold hands. She sat back at the pictures like this, and I was trying to, there's nothing happening. But she did agree to come again. The second time she came. We went home. We got to her gate, and her mother said, "Bring him in for a cup of tea." "Oh no," she said, "he hasn't got time." I said, "Yes, I think Oh, then we fell out eventually, and we separated for quite a while. And the corps officer was very unhappy about it. He said to me one day, "I'm sorry you and Jill have fallen out." I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but what can I do?" We said, we must think of something. He said, would you collect a road for me for self-denial? I said, yeah, I'll do that. So he gave me the envelopes and I was going collecting. When I went to the night to do the collecting, who was on the other side of the road collecting the children? He'd have fixed up that she would be there at the same time. We were married a few months later, and we were married for over 60 years. And she was a wonderful companion. And many of you remember her. And she had a mind of her own, didn't she? I can remember her telling you once in a meeting that she wasn't going to do something you asked her to do. Anyway, that's there. So then I went to training college. I had a hard time in training college. It wasn't easy for me. But we managed to get through. The commissioner said once he was going to send me home. I said, I won't go. He said, you'll have to. I said, no, I'll sit on the steps and notify the newspaper what's happening. Anyway, he let me stay. And in the book, you'll find several accounts of the things that happened there in the days that we were there. I was humbled, and they didn't have me in the band. I had to carry the lamp for the band. There's a story in the book about the lamp, which I think you'll find enjoyable. And Les Condon was in the same session as me, and he and I were on the same work section. We were on dining hall. We had to scrub the dining hall, the men's dining hall floor, and dish out the porridge in the mornings. And Les wasn't as big as me, and he was a bit troublesome sometimes. And we used to see how quick we could get the dishes filled, and he'd go so quick you couldn't do it. I remember picking him up and sitting next to him on the hot plate. Dear old Les. There's also a story in there. Well, I won't tell you the story, but I'm going to read the book. But about our commission heard the international staff band playing choruses in the prayer meeting and thought the cadets could do the same. But the cadets couldn't, most couldn't play without music. It's a very funny story. And Les, who was the bass trombone player in the band, had to play E-flat bass for the choruses because none of the bass players. So he tried to play the E-flat bass and show the B-flat fingering with his hand. But by the time we did it, of course, it was too late, so they'd be about a beat behind it. It was an absolute riot, I tell you. Eventually we got through training college. There are a few humorous stories in there about training college days. Eventually we got through training college and we became corps officers. Our first corps was Alderney in the Channel Islands, and that was an experience to be remembered. We had to fly there, you couldn't go by boat. So our first corps we flew, which we thought was... The aeroplane seated 5 people. And when you got on, they looked at your size and showed you which side to sit. I felt very embarrassed for 3 of us sitting this side and a very large lady on her own sitting over there. Yes, we were corps officers, and then I was a corps of 7 different corps. Our final corps being Twickenham, and then I was summoned to National Headquarters and became the National Bandmaster, along with Dean Goffin, who had been the National Bandmaster and then had become Secretary for Bands. And a whole new life opened up then, with all kinds of experiences. If Dean Goffin was an unusual character, some of you will have remembered him. He was a quick-tempered man, he great man of ideas, splendid man to work with, but he didn't have a lot of patience with people who took a long time to make up their minds. We used to tour around getting... He came up with the idea we'd have a festival of gospel song with a 1,000-voice chorus at the Royal Albert Hall. And we sat together and discussed which sort of songs we'd use and all that kind of stuff. And then we started rehearsals all around the territory. up as far as Newcastle, all up around there, Liverpool, you name it. And we'd have to go up there several times in order to get all these songs done. I can remember being up near Newcastle when the rehearsal was underway and a group of songsters turned up late. And Dean didn't say welcome, he said, "Where do you think you've been?" We started here at 7 o'clock, where have you been? Actually their bus had broken down, see? So they weren't at all happy, and suddenly got up and went out. So Jill rushed up after them and said, look, actually he'd lost his son, his son had died. She said, he's under pressure. He didn't mean that. And eventually she persuaded him to come